Hey Kriegers, Robo here, and welcome back to a brand new custom Amiibo video. Do you guys still remember the mystery we left you guys with during our Splatfest Floats Diorama? Here we asked you guys, and some of you might have already noticed it, but we got one more Amiibo holder to place in the front of the diorama. But for who can it be? Place your bets down in the comments. And finally, we get to show off who that might actually be. We did get some good guesses in the comments. We got a guess for Marigold, which would have been another good choice for the Amiibo. Another one was an Alterna Maria Amiibo from Rainbow Kitsune. I mean... But anyway, we hope you guys are as excited as Wormly here, because to fill the final 7th Amiibo slot, we will be making a cracked Cuttlefish custom Amiibo from Return of the Mammalians. Black Crystal Paw got so close with their guest for a post-story mode crack, but since that would be a little too empty on a full Amiibo by itself, or we will have to make a 300% version of it, I wanted to make a version of Correct before the events of the story mode. Since you might not know, but if you've not done the story mode yet, he can be seen vibing to the Splatfest music as he did in Splatoon 1. So that made me think he was the perfect last addition for the Splatfest diorama. So, since he's not gonna need these anymore, I'm first going to be removing his legs from the model. Then I'm going to model the edge for the manhole cover. Since the manhole in-game is so much larger, I had to shrink it down enough so it would fit over the entire Amiibo base, but that it would still give the impression of the original large one. So to get that effect that it had to go on for a while, and to give a little bit more space to place Greg, I needed to make use of the extra space in the Amiibo base to make a pit that I would be able to place Greg in. Once I got that pit the way I liked, I added a disc to make for a temporary manhole cover, so that I can finally start to pose Greg. Luckily I did not have to do any legwork this time, but I did have to make sure that I got the back correct and that I still left enough space in the front. Because next, I'm going to want to pose his right hand to grab hold of the edge of the manhole. This way, it will look like he's holding up himself by his right, all the while his left arm will be holding up the manhole cover in the back. Getting his hand to bend enough to wrap around the cover without mangling the rest of his arm with all of the twists and turns was quite a challenge. But I managed to get the twist equally divided over the different rotational points in the arm to make sure that it doesn't look like a tangled mess. and after debating whether to add the Zapfish plushie, now all that was left was to add some extra geometry to the metals, so those are not seen as flat sheets anymore in the eyes of my slicer. I was ready to send him off to the slicer and get him to the printer. And while he was printing, I was able to work on the manhole cover. Since I used Blender to see that the cover needed to be 15mm wide, I knew that I wanted to make a 45mm circle out of this metal mesh. So that next I could make two 15mm wide circles with a 4mm wide edge from some craft paper. These are then glued to both sides of the mesh to make for a solid edge around the manhole cover. Then, with a bamboo skewer hinge on the back and some final trimming, I could add it to the rest of the printed figure. And I know what you're thinking, why didn't you model the manhole cover in Blender? Well, if you take a look at the metal mesh, each and every one of those crossings would have needed to be supported in the slicer software. This would have been so much removal, and probably from my experience, all of the mesh would have been too small to actually print properly, or it would break during the removal of the supports. That's why I opted to make it myself instead of in Blender. But now, with the primers added, a nice reddish brown for the manhole, and a coat of black for the void, I was ready to start to apply the first cuts of skin tone for Greg, starting with a base coat of tanned flesh. After this, I applied a dragon's red for the base of his shirt. Next, I applied a barbarian flesh for the first highlights of his skin. With this amiibo, I wanted to practice my layering, since most Splatoon paint jobs are pretty flat, to be honest, with the only highlights coming from either metallics, for which I have some special paints, or the way light interacts with the shape of the object, but that's mostly represented with just a flat layer of paint on most amiibos, so I rarely get to practice these more advanced painting techniques. And to be honest, it will show. I still have a long way to go with these techniques. But for first or second try, it was not too bad. At least while the layer of skin tone dries, I can add some shining silver to the mesh of the manhole cover. By using my technique of only using the tiniest amount of pressure on the tip of the brush and carefully sliding it along the top surface of the mesh to avoid all of the crossings, I can prevent the bristles from getting stuck in between the openings of the mesh and flinging paint all over the rest of the figure as soon as they release. This saved a lot of cleanup time afterwards. Which allowed me to immediately tackle the silver on the hinge. And lastly, I also used the silver to bring more of a metallic look to the manhole cover. Then a lava orange for his headband. And now I could add the lightest layer of paint on top with a mix of white and barbarian flesh for the highest spots on Craig's face. But in the end, I was really disappointed with how this layering came out. The highlights ended up way too white in comparison to the tanned flesh base. So to try and save it, I took a little bit of thinned down elven flesh and applied it over all of the skin to create a more cohesive layer. And I think it worked out great! You can still see the highs and lows underneath the elven flesh, but it does bring down the way too big contrast between the tanned flesh and the white barbarian tones. Amiibo! Now, with the skin finally figured out, I can also add a top coat for his beard, the eyebrows and the tentacles, with a mummy's ropes for the top of his hair. Hello! Yeah, but since the color matched so well with the reference, I then needed to mix it with some white to still have a lighter shade that I could use for the underside of the tentacles. But first, I needed to use my thinnest brush to add his black eye mask around those massive eyeballs of his. I still really love the detail that the only reason that he was able to spy on the Octarians for as long as he had in Splatoon 1 is because of his big eyeballs that looked like an Octarian trooper's. With those added, next I could use an elemental bolt for the clouds on his shirt, by making a ring that goes around the shirt with some random spikes and dips for that more organic shape. While that dries, I also add the first layer of the lava orange mixed with the mummy's ropes for his gradient. By applying a full version on the ends of the tentacles and then slowly adding more mummy's ropes to the mix, we can transition back to the base color of the tentacles to create this base gradient that I then smooth with a clean wet brush. Next I got some snake scales for green, some crystal blue and some pure red for the 3 strips of fabric on the medals. All the while I'm making sure that I still keep enough white in between to have all 3 lines have an equal width. I used a thin brush with some black again to make for the trunks of the palms on Greg's shirt. I also add a dot of ochre brown for the base of his eyes, which I then mix with some leather brown underneath to have a gradient in his eyes too. Finally, I get to use some gold again for the medals. I missed this since last time with Cypher we didn't even get to use it. Because
I love gold!
Oh, yeah, and we also have some shining silver on one of the other medals, but who cares about that? Gold! Now with those done, I have to use the mix of white and mummy's ropes that I'd made for the underside of his tentacles to add the seaweed? Or are they palm leaves? Well, whatever, this to his shirt. Together with these highlights on the elemental bolts, clouds and bushes. Getting the brush in there is not easy, especially on the back. Like, I had to peek through the mesh to even see where the tip might end up, because you lose all of your sense of depth. But luckily it all worked out in the end. And now to add these lava orange dots to the tentacles to finish these off. God, it looks so cool already. Now, all there was left to do was to add the base underneath the platform and to add the gloss varnish that goes on the tentacles. And his eyes. His eyebrows. And his beard. And with that, we've not only finished this awesome cracked Cuttlefish amiibo, but now we've also finished the last amiibo for our Splatfest Floats Diorama. Whoops, wrong one, sorry. Hey Creators, Robo here, and we hope you enjoyed this video. First off, I wanted to thank all of you guys for 4,000 subscribers. We really appreciate every single one of you. But now we do have one more question for you. Since we have not really thought of a good way to celebrate this occasion with you guys. We could do another Q&A video, which, I mean, we can still do if you guys like. If you have any other good ideas, please let us know in the comments below. We would love to hear you guys' input on this. And what you guys would think would be a fun way to celebrate 4,000 subscribers. And speaking of your ideas, we still have not thought of a good amiibo to put into Greg's base. So, if you have a good idea of an amiibo that you would think would be fitting to see show up as we scan Greg's amiibo into the game, please leave your suggestions down in the comments below. But with that, that's going to be all from us for now. Keep those creative gears turning, and we will see you guys in our next video.